For all of you just joining us, this is another episode of Never Again podcast series live with Meir Halevi Weinstein. And we'll start in 27 seconds, or 26, or 25, or whatever it takes to count down to 0 from 30. So tonight's show is a special show because it's the first show of the new year, and we have some great accomplishments as well as some challenges for the next year. We do some guests with us this evening. The first of which will be Meir who's a Middle East analyst, who says pretty much to the point that nothing is more important in my life than affiliating with organizations and movements about the defense of the Jewish people. He was the past Zionist Organization of America director. He was also the past national chairman of the Jewish Defense League. He's a prolific writer, educator, lecturer, and we look forward to having him join us this evening as he's joined us in the past. Also joining us tonight will be Alan Skorsky, the author of Israel Betrayed and the co-host of The Definitive Wrap, a pro-America, pro-Israel podcast, emphasizing the love of our flag, our country, our men, and our women in blue. He's been a political activist and congressional advisor for over 30 years and appears frequently on a variety of TV shows and news broadcasts. So this show will emphasize a year in review, our successes, our accomplishments, failures, and challenges. And I think first and foremost, the most important thing is our most notable success and our pride is the growth we've experienced from our viewers, our listeners, and our supporters throughout the past year. And we're proud to see the statistics that on Facebook, over 100,000 people have seen us, and on YouTube, about as many. Some shows have been watched by 1,000, 2,000 people, oftentimes live, and then the follow-up. So I hope those who are watching are sharing this with their friends. But of course, the most important thing are the many guests who provided their time, their space, and their wisdom to join us and give their opinions and their input and support us. As tonight's guests, these guests have been here before. Some have been on multiple times. We look forward to all of these guests joining us again in the upcoming year. So we look at the year in review. Food vendors, the anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic, anti-police, pretty much anti-everything. She's also anti-business. I think her biggest fallacy is that she was a good businesswoman. Had she been, she would not have declared bankruptcy recently. So that's a success. And I think we were very instrumental in just bringing it out into the open. We didn't coerce or strive for heartaches, but we brought it out for the people to see. And a lot of people joined in the bandwagon and helped us in that quest. Of course, another one was the canceled anti-Semitic motorcycle rally, which we got right on top of, got out in front of, and there was no rally. Of course, the CUPE, the Canadian Union of Public Employees, the largest union in Canada, was going to endorse BDS, and we jumped on that quickly, and a lot of people joined us, and because of that, they voted down the vote to support BDS. And there's, of course, the Toronto District School Board, which has been in the news over and over, first with the Desmond Cole, and then with the blatant anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic sentiment, and their attempt to condemn the only Jew who came out in front of it and condemned the anti-Semitism. She was brought up and could have been censured, but I think thanks to us and a lot of other organizations, that also did not happen. And also earlier in this year, I think a very big accomplishment, not only by us, but a bunch of organizations as well, a feeble attempt to have a Nakba exhibit at the Canadian Museum of Human Rights, a museum which was started by Holocaust survivors and funded by Jewish organizations, and our Say No to Nakba was successful, as we could see, because there is no pseudo fake Palestinian exhibit happening at that museum as far as my last check. And as always, we're going to have Meir start off with the Parsha of the week after we finish this quick review of our successes. We'll also discuss about a lot of challenges for the upcoming year. And we stress the fact that the world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. There's plenty of evil, and we need more people who are willing to stand up and take a stand against evil, as Albert Einstein said so succinctly. And here's Meir, who's going to bring the Parsha of the week to the forefront.
Good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be with you. It's great sharing this information, getting the word out, call to action. It's amazing, actually. We've had the show for a year, a full year. At least once a week, we have had the show on live, sometimes taking phone calls from people. Now we're using an active chat, and we're addressing concerns and questions that people have that could post on the chat to the best that we could do. We have had superb guests on our show that we could discuss, really get into what the pressing issues are that are affecting our community, Israel, the Jewish people. And, it's just amazing when I look back. Just one thing to go over that I don't want to forget before I get into the Parsha, and I'll just make it very short also and direct the message of the Parsha. But we have reached with our show alone, not our postings of issues of concern, because we do share information also on our page and through our email blasts. But our show has reached over 100,000 people in the past year. Now, moving forward, we want that to be 10 times higher, and it's very easy to do that. All we have to do is there's some promotional paid advertising by Facebook and other social media platforms. It doesn't cost much. For as little as $30, $36 on our video, it could reach, that one video alone could reach 6,000, 7,000, 10,000 people. That's what we want to do moving forward. So we need people who are going to contribute to us, who are going to be part of the movement of truth. Join Israel Now, go onto our website, make a contribution, israelnow.ca, make a regular contribution, small, medium, large, whatever you could do, whatever your heart desires. We'd appreciate it, and we're going to get the job done even more. We want to move forward 2022 times 10 the impact, and then continue on with other projects. And there's a lot of projects, lots. projects. This Shabbat, we read in the shuls, every synagogue, Parshas Be'era. And in Parshas Be'era, it starts with the plagues meted out against the Egyptians to set the Jewish people free. But before anything, God speaks to Moses, and he says, "Come, speak to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, that he send Bnei Israel, the Jewish people, out of his land." And Moses spoke before God, saying, "Behold, the Jewish people have not listened to me. How then will Pharaoh listen to me?" And the rabbis comment on that. That's the classic Kal v'chomer. What that is, in short, there's ways how Jewish law come into being with debate and arguments and proofs, how the sages have arrived at different aspects of Jewish law. And one aspect is called a Kal v'chomer, which means that if I give you a proof that this happened, such happened, and in this case, Moses saying to God, the Jewish people who are oppressed and tired and worn out and going through slavery, they didn't listen to me. And I brought them the message from you that you're ready to liberate them from Egypt, set them free. They're not listening to me. All the more so, how is Pharaoh going to listen to me? That's called a Kal v'chomer. So God tells Moses, just go speak to Pharaoh. Go speak to Pharaoh. He goes speaks to Pharaoh. They show him a miracle with the staff. Pharaoh's not even impressed. And God finally tells Moses, now there was a certain point in time in the encounters that Moses had with Pharaoh that were the seminal point, I would call it, where he sees this is working. This is going to work. There's no question about it. It's happening. What's that moment? That moment is God tells Moses to go out in the morning, the crack of dawn, first thing in the morning, and to meet Pharaoh by the river. Now, a lot of people just gloss over that. Okay, so I met Pharaoh early in the morning, crack of dawn at the river. But what's going on? Why did God tell him to go first thing in the morning? He wanted Moses to see something. And the rabbis comment, Rashi comments, what was it? Pharaoh convinced, he was a dictator. He convinced everyone that he's a god, that he's a deity, that he doesn't have to go to the bathroom ever. He would sit in his palace. He wouldn't go. There was no washroom breaks. You hear about some dictators today that claim they're deities and nobody sees them go to the bathroom to relieve themselves. God told Moses to go and see Pharaoh first thing in the morning at the river bank. Because it was then, at that time, when Pharaoh would get up in the morning, that's when he would go out to relieve himself. And nobody was aware of this. Moses is there with Aaron. And this is known now. Moses sees that glimmer of hope that now I understand. Now I understand, and now I'm convinced. Not only do I have a Muna in God, God tells him, but I physically saw something different now. Something different. The Achilles heel. I know we're going to be successful. We have serious problems today of anti-Semitism. There is an Achilles heel to the BDS movement. There's no question about it. They say they stand for human rights. They say they're human rights groups. The exact opposite of human rights. They have nothing to do with human rights. They falsify history. They falsify everything. some of our people are living in fear because of the BDS movement, which is a radical Islamic movement, which is part of the Hamas Islamic Jihad infrastructure, or the Muslim Brotherhood infrastructure that wants no Israel. We have to understand that there's an illusion. It's all hot air. We have to prick that hot air balloon. We've had a lot of successes last year. We'll have more successes. Most recent incident of anti-Semitism in New York City. Jewish man, a young Jewish man, goes shopping. He's wearing an IDF sweatshirt, and he's beaten up for that. Where's the line? Does this mean that any Jew, anyone for that matter, who sells or purchases an Israeli product, any product, can be subject to an attack? In the eyes of the BDS, yes. And we have to be ready for that. How do we get ready for that? Well, one, we have to speak the truth. There's no question about it. Number two, we're not so weak. We're really not so weak. There's a lot of Israelis that have moved out of Israel into the United States, into Western countries, and some of them are moving back to Israel, but all of them have some military experience. We need to unify. We can't be afraid. Can't be afraid at all. Never back down. We have allies too. We have some people who are on our side. And we have to wake up those allies, and we have to pull the rug from under the feet of the enemy. We're going to be getting into discussions tonight. We have Meir Jolowitz, we have Alan Skorsky with us. Alan Skorsky today was at the rally in New York, fighting back against this anti-Semitism. So let's get into it. Is Alan on and Meir on that we could discuss this?
Good evening, gentlemen, and Happy New Year.
Good evening. Happy New Year. How are you doing?
Thank God, thank God. Mayor, and Doctor, always good to see you guys.
Good.
Good. So you brought up the rally, and I was there
Yes.
today.
Yes.
It was something I felt I had to go to. This wasn't just one of those run-of-the-mill rallies against anti-Semitism, which I think many New Yorkers have just rallied out of. But this was, as I think you may have mentioned earlier, two young men, two kids, who were wearing IDF hoodies, who were confronted by, I believe, Arabs, Palestinians, whatever you want to call them, and they were told either take them off or else. They did not take them off, and so there was an or else. You saw their pictures, they had black eyes. We saw them today at the rally. They're doing much better. Their spirits are very, very strong. They are so not intimidated. These are, Meir, these are your kind of guys. These are tough guys who would take another beating just to stand their ground. So the rally was, again, it was a successful rally. It was organized by a new elected council member, Ina Vernikov. She's from the former Soviet Union.
Right.
Dov Hikind was there. Across the street, you had the typical anti-Jewish Neturei Karta. And here was interesting about it. I'm used to seeing the Neturei Karta at the anti-Israel rallies because they're anti-Zionist and they have their so-called religious beliefs against the state of Israel before Mashiach comes. Well, today's rally was not about Israel. It was about two Jewish kids who got beat up for wearing an IDF t-shirt. So it shows you just how extreme the Neturei Karta is. And they proudly march with those who seek our demise. I don't know how much of that. I know that I had sent some of the recording to Gary, and there's some of it I know that he had wanted to show later on. But that's kind of my report from the event this afternoon.
Let me just make a little, or interject just a little comment about, so when you mentioned the Neturei Karta was there, they're always a prop used by the BDS. If we have these guys, and obviously, how could you say we're anti-Semitic? So the Neturei Karta, they're on record saying the attack against these two Jewish young men in New York was not anti-Semitism. Also, you have other Jews who have joined the BDS that say this is not anti-Semitism, the beating they received, them being called dirty Jews. But when I looked into those postings by the Neturei Karta or by these BDS Jews, so-called Jews, I see they're liked and retweeted by so many BDS organizations, Samadon, and well, you name it. And Samadon certainly is like a network. They're very involved in spreading. The government of Israel has actually listed them as an extension of the PFLP. So the BDS, they consider these attacks not to be anti-Semitic, and that we should expect a lot more. And therefore, we got to expose them, and we have to fight it. Have to fight it.
Right.
But they're all into it.
Correct.
Do we have Meir Jolwitz on the connection there?
Hello? Can I be heard?
Hey, Meir, how you doing?
Can I be heard?
I can hear you. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I have no comment on the rally or the protest today. I know the incident. I don't know what I'd like to know. Alan said it was a successful gathering, a successful rally. I don't know what constitutes a successful rally. Perhaps he can give some detail to that. All I know is that it's not successful in the sense that even though a Dov Hikind could be there, or a councilwoman, where's the greater Jewish population? Where's the greater Jewish community? Where are the Jewish organizations?
No kidding.
Right. Well, from that aspect, so that's a continuing failure of those organizations. But as far as this being done on short notice, and Ina Vernikov, who called this rally, I think, just a few days ago, from that aspect, it was a decent turnout. Again, it's not one of those 5,000 people at Times Square, but as far as the Jewish groups go, that's a different conversation. We cannot expect them to be there for us. You saw what happened this past summer when Alicia Wiesel tried to put together a rally in Washington D.C. that should have had 10,000 people instead of 100 people, or I think it was a little over 1,000 people actually. So the failure of the greater Jewish organizations, that's not the barometer for me. For our people standing up for those in New York.
I'm sorry, I certainly don't want to be a naysayer. You simply said that there weren't 5,000 people there. You said it was short notice. What were the number of people who were there? I'm just curious. That number hasn't been spoken yet.
So I didn't count them, but I think there were a few hundred people on our side.
Okay.
Who showed up. So from that standpoint, I'm happy, and what I'm happy about that, the kids themselves were there. I'm happy that those who are from the neighborhood, the elected officials from that neighborhood, that they were there. I've given up all hope on expecting greater support from the bigger organizations, but from those who are more closely involved, they were there. And I know that the hate crimes task force and the NYPD, that I'm told at least that they know who the attackers are. They're just looking for them now.
I can't understand why there weren't any of these like Chabad from Brooklyn, their mitzvah mobiles, and
Oh, there was someone there.
Community
there was someone there from Chabad putting.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if it's only this many, and that really speaks volumes about the community itself. And
again, it wasn't publicized in a grander scale. Usually the bigger events, they have weeks of planning in advance of coordination. This was literally stitched together in the last few days.
I'll reserve my comments. I mean, if you want to draw juxtaposition between what happens, Alan is a good man who does good work and everything else. But if you draw the juxtaposition with the Black community as opposed to the Jewish community, the Black community doesn't need weeks to organize. The Black community doesn't have to have good publicity. Overnight, they will rally because they have a vested interest in the greater cause. And what we need to do, I know that when I spoke to Meir about appearing today on this broadcast would have, is we were going to do an assessment of the state of the condition of Canadian jury, American jury, Israeli jury today. Where are we today? And the answer, it's shameful. It's
Right.
terribly shameful. And with all due respect, if we need a couple of weeks in order to organize when something happens, that is a comment about us. And it's not a good comment.
No, I don't disagree with anything you just said. I have gone kind of as an observer to some BLM rallies, and the reason they do better is because they get all the progressives and they get all the Jews who feel guilty
Right.
to show up. With
Right.
us, we are on our own. Now, I was happy to see that there were some Asian groups who joined with us there from the neighborhood, because I think we have formed an alliance with Asian groups. But no, as far as getting support from other groups, we're always going to be on our own, because there is a certain criteria to be on the side of victimization. The Black community, the gay community, women, Jews are considered part of the owner class, as Randy Weingarten from the teachers union said this past summer. Jews are part of the owner class. We are part of the oppressor class. So no, as you, Mayor, you were correct in that we are on our own. But again, as far as getting rallies go, we can't even agree amongst ourselves what anti-Semitism is. When you have, and you, again, I don't consider anything that Neturei Karta says as meaning anything. But when we already have within our own people a polarization and a division over what constitutes anti-Zionism, what constitutes anti-Semitism, we're lost. So from that standpoint, yes, the Jewish community in big trouble. I was referring to today's rally as successful, that they put it together and they got something out of it. But as far as the grander scheme of things, no, the Jews are screwed. We've lost. We can talk about everything that's going on in Canada. We can talk about the fact that Students for Justice in Palestine are on 180 campuses around the country. We can talk about how Arab activists who attack Jews are fearless. I have a friend who is a teacher at Kingsborough Community College. And there's a big scandal going on there, how Jewish professors now are withdrawing from the union because they are harassed and they are targeted for firing and other reprisals. So from that perspective, Mayor Jolovitz, you're 100% correct. The state for American Jewry is at the worst that I have ever seen it.
Yeah.
It's not Palestinians, it's not Arabs, it's Islamists, it's progressives. You look at the squad, the irrelevant dunderhead squad, the people who were just 4 voices, according to the Jewish left, just 2 years ago. Now, again, you can say that none of them got their agenda through, but it doesn't matter. Look at the fear that they have instilled in the leadership. You look at last year when President Biden praised Rashida Tlaib when he was on the tarmac at Michigan Airport. You look at the majority leader, Steny Hoyer, who has more awards from yeshivas than I'll ever have, standing on the floor of the House and saying, you may not agree with everything that she says, but she's basically a good person. Really?
Right.
And do you remember when the Congress wanted to pass a bill condemning anti-Semitism, but the Democrats watered it down to include all groups so that Ilhan Omar wouldn't be singled out, and yet Ilhan Omar was able to pass an anti-Islamophobia bill?
Right.
And you don't think that the Jews are in trouble? And we are in deep trouble.
Well, thank you for that. I agree with you, Alan. The point that needs to be brought up, and I think it's been mentioned time and again, it's a realization of reality. The Jews make up 1.8% of the American population. The Jews, we know, the proclivities to, it isn't Judaism. That's not the ism that matters for them. It's liberalism. It's leftism. The coffers of the Democratic Party, the figure that we can ascertain, and this is give or take 2 or 3 percentage points, 60 to 62% of the dollars that are raised by the Democratic Party are raised on the back of Jews. So the Jews, who make up 1.8% of the American population, contribute how many times fold to their population? They give to the Democratic Party. The problem, with all due respect, and I don't mean to minimize it, and if one knows my background, you understand how we used to respond, even in small numbers, to these types of tragedies. But the point that we have to look at is the bigger picture. That bigger picture is we are the problem. That cartoon character, Pogo, the possum, in 1953, when he came out and said, we have met the enemy and he is us. Now, that was a slogan which wasn't popularized actually until Vietnam, 1970, but that is exactly it. The cartoon character knows we have met the enemy and he is us. And in this particular case, you mentioned, take a case of AOC. AOC, when she went on Instagram 2.5 years ago, she had 7,000 followers. And she very quickly built that to 12,000 followers. And people said, wow, it's dramatic, twice as many. Today, she has 2.3 million. This is where we are. And who supports her? The Democratic Party. And who supports the Democratic Party? The Jews. We are the problem. And we can't pretend otherwise. The fact that there are a couple of thugs who roughed up a couple of Jews, they need to be taken care of. I will use whatever euphemism I can to say they need to be taken care of. But they aren't the problem. Jewish leadership sitting in all the Jewish organizations, they need to be taken care of in a very different manner. They need to be taken care of. And the reality is, it's interesting that the lesson of Hanukkah, the rabbi always said, the lesson of Hanukkah is that God didn't reward the Jewish people for succeeding. He rewarded the Jewish people for trying. And those people who rallied today with you, Alan, commendable, tremendous, wonderful. But the bigger fight isn't against those hoodlums who roughed up a couple of Jews. The bigger fight is in-house. And it is a fight that we are losing through no fault of our own. We are losing, and we will continue to lose. All of a sudden, I mean, I don't have to tell you, all of a sudden it becomes problematic for Jews to think that there should be any Holocaust study on campus. It isn't right. Jews are the ones who are saying it. All of a sudden, I lecture quite extensively. And I was asked by a number of people who are my regulars. Yeah, I see the graphic. That's wonderful. I was asked by a number of people who support Hillel, for example, here in Arizona. And they said, you do a wonderful job propagating for Israel. Why don't you go on campus at ASU and do the same thing? And I said, without even knowing who the Hillel director was, I don't think she's going to want me there. So the person made the connection, and the response was, she'd like to interview me to find out whether or not I was too pro-Israel in speaking to the people. I did a search. And when she was hired, there were a couple of newspaper articles written about her. And she came in with her mission. This is what she'd like to do, and this is what she wants to promote, and so on and so forth. And there were several pieces that were written about her. This is our mission. Not one word was spoken in any of the various elements that actually publicized her coming. The word Israel didn't appear any place. You know what they have instead of Israel? They don't talk about Israel. In order to get the students to come out, falafel night. The students don't come out to rally on behalf of Israel. They come out for falafel night, so they can save $6 at the local falafel stand. This is where we are today. And when I was speaking to Meir about the state of affairs, the state of union, so to speak, here it is at the end of the year, and we look back, the situation is not good. And if you wonder why it's not good, and I don't want to continue, I don't want to just pontificate. You have Mahmoud Abbas sitting in the home of Benny Gantz.
Yep.
A week after he said that he would make sure that the very last dollars that they have in the conference of the PA is going to go for the pay for slave. And 2 days after he meets with Benny Gantz, he basically says that Israel, he used the euphemism, Israel will be ended. We are to blame. And by the way, this didn't begin with Benny Gantz. Ehud Olmert entertained Mahmoud Abbas twice. And before that, Ehud Barak, when he was prime minister, brings in Arafat. He brings in Arafat to his mansion in Kochav Yair on Erev Shabbat. He brings him in, and Ehud Barak later described this appearance by, he said, my daughter, who was at the time young, was overwhelmed by the guest that we had. And Ehud Barak described that Arafat patted the top of the head of Ehud Barak's daughter, and he said she was mesmerized. This is the biggest mass murderer since Hitler, and the Israeli prime minister is inviting him to his house on Erev Shabbat. And the question, I wrote an op-ed at the time. And when I wrote the op-ed, I asked the question, it's a very simple question. Did Ehud Barak, the most decorated soldier in Israel's history, did Ehud Barak ever invite to his mansion in Kochav Yair a soldier who might have lost a limb defending the state of Israel against that mass murderer? And the answer is no, he never did.
Wow.
The problem isn't the Arab community of Bay Ridge, and I don't mean to suggest or minimize that it isn't a problem, but that isn't the greater problem. If one walks through Bay Ridge today, Bay Ridge used to be Italian. You walk through Bay Ridge today, and you think you're in Dearborn, Michigan. How many stores don't even have English signs? It's all Arabic signs. That's what's happening out there. What is happening inside our house is that our leaders, our so-called leaders, even the best organizations, I mean, everyone out there, they all support AIPAC. They support AIPAC. I don't even have to go after J Street, okay? AIPAC believes in a two-state solution. What does a two-state solution mean? It means that we are rewarding an Arab element that had waged war against our children for 2 generations now. We reward them by giving them a state of their own. It means that we will now allow, for the AIPAC, ask one of these Jewish experts, ask one of these Jewish so-called friends of Israel, if in fact you believe in a two-state solution. It's a very simple thing. Here's a pen, there's a map of the Middle East. Why don't you draw the lines? And wherever you draw the lines, we will accept your solution, your two-state illusion. Draw the lines where Israel will be and where Palestine will be. And keep in mind, we would have to remind them that the map that you draw would have to be such that it satisfies the Palestinian Arab demands, and it would have to satisfy Israel's needs to be safe and secure. End of conversation. End of conversation. This is insanity. The biggest enemy of the Jewish people, one of the biggest enemies, Noam Chomsky, refers to this as institutional insanity. Institutional insanity is when, as opposed to individual insanity, is when an entire nation state, when a country, when a people, when an entity loses its mind. Dear friends, we've lost ours. Sorry, I didn't.
Mayor, let me add to that. I've traveled across Canada fighting against anti-Semitism, and I've traveled different cities in the States also to organize against anti-Semitism. I remember one time traveling out to Calgary, and I have supporters out in Calgary, and they're setting up an event at some facility in Calgary on a Sunday, and the Hillel and the Stand With Us chapter, Stand With Us, they put out very nice flyers to combat, the BDS or anything like that. But Stand With Us and Hillel made it clear to the Jewish students, if you attend the speech by Mayor Weinstein, we are not going to allow you to come to any of the other activities that are going to be on campus for Jewish students. Now, the event I had in Calgary, it was packed. I got a standing ovation when I spoke. There was no problem with that. And I organized the community and supporters in Calgary that we would be countering events such as Al-Quds Day and other BDS campaigns there. And we had some successes, in fact, there. And there's some good people in Calgary. But I remember that, the Hillel and the Stand With Us. And that's only in Calgary. So, Mayor, when you're going on about the lack of leadership and what's going on in the larger Jewish community, that we are to blame, there's absolutely no question about it, because with proper leadership and vision and faith, there's no question about it where we would be. It's an abomination what's taking place with these leaders that get paid. In fact, get paid a lot.
Oh, much more than you could possibly imagine. And
Right.
and the worst part of it is this is not something which is endemic only to the American landscape. It's happening. I know you do. I mean, if you follow what's going on in Israel, you watch the Knesset, and you have Arab members of Ram, okay, the Islamist branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, whatever. They are sitting as deputy speaker of the Knesset, and they are throwing out of the Knesset Jewish members of Knesset. They argue, and we're in a twilight zone. We're in a twilight zone where Naftali Bennett is elected in Israel. He gets 7 mandates. One of them doesn't join him. He is prime minister with 6 mandates. Okay? Now he realizes he's toast. When he runs again, he's not going to get any right-wing votes. So he is caught up in the Stockholm syndrome. It's a Stockholm syndrome. And we have a government now. It's interesting. I think I mentioned this once before in this broadcast, that all the pundits, all the so-called experts, all the analysts, all predicted, every one of them from the right, they all predicted that this government in Israel wasn't going to last. Why? How can you have a government with Naftali Bennett or Gideon Sar when you have a government with Mansour Abbas? Can't be. Can't be. It's going to collapse. Some projected it was actually going to collapse before they actually sat for the first time. Others said it'll last a week and 2 weeks and 3 weeks. I projected at the time, not because there's any great genius in making this assessment, that it's going to last. And the reason it's going to last is if elections were ever held again, Naftali Bennett, Ayelet Shaked, Gideon Sar are toast. They will never be elected because they betrayed their voters. On the other hand, Mansour Abbas, who basically worked his way in very cleverly, he played Netanyahu, who was also willing to talk to him. He works his way. He will never be in government ever again. So despite the fact that each side is pretending we're going to pull out, they're not going to pull out. These are criminals who rely on each other in order to stay in power and in control for as long as they can. It's not going away, this government. The only option, by the way, if you've been watching all these attacks on Ayelet Shaked, and she realizes she's basically a good person, but then again, we know that sometimes smart people do some very stupid things, and she did some very stupid things, and I think she regrets it, and she pretends that she doesn't. The only thing that could possibly bring this government down is the fact that Likud will somehow or someone, I mean, even within Likud, we see a move to the left. But if some right-wing party, Likud is the only one who could do it, is offer her a safe thing and tells her to bolt. If she bolts and the government collapses, and the government promises some ministry, she needs a safe face historically. Other than that, we are in trouble. Why do I bring this up? I bring it up because that old maxim, do you expect me to be more Catholic than the Pope? It applies here. Do you expect American Jewish leaders, and the whole leaders is obviously put in air quotes, leaders, what a joke. But do you actually expect them to be more pro-Israel than the left-leaning government is? Why should they be? Why should they be?
Let me add something to that, Meir. So today, I saw it on Twitter that Yair Lapid was trying to get support from Naftali Bennett for the appointment of a woman in Israel, to be the new head of the Jewish agency. Now, it ends up that this woman that Yair Lapid would like to see appointed to lead the Jewish agency, and Naftali Bennett did not agree. Why did Naftali Bennett not agree? Because this woman, with all her degrees, university degrees, and all that, and accomplishments, she publicly posts on social media that on Passover, she puts deliberately bread on her Seder plate. What kind of Jewish identity? Jewish agency leader, the foreign minister of Israel, wants this woman to head the Jewish agency that publicly denounces Passover, eats bread. Jews are not supposed to eat bread on Passover. It's ridiculous.
That's because Yair Lapid was also raised in a family that when Passover was being celebrated in Israel, his family, Tommy Lapid, his father, would go to East Jerusalem, which is the only place in Israel that you could actually buy bread. Later, it became even worse. Jews, where did Jews vacation? What became their favorite vacation time during Passover? No, they didn't go to Cyprus. They didn't go to Greece. They went to Egypt. Wait, you want to? Jews celebrating the Passover went to Egypt. I think you used the word, it's abomination. And it is reality. It is reality. The Jew who stands up and says we need to defend other Jews, he's the extremist. He's the extremist, right? It's remarkable. You, Mayor,
and to those people, the nationality law, that's why it's become so controversial, nationality law in Israel, to really define Israel as a Jewish state, because you got these people who they're against it.
Mayor, if you invite Alan and I to join you in a year and a half, August 25th of 2023, a little more than a year and a half, Naftali Bennett steps aside, politely, courteous, and Yair Lapid becomes prime minister. Yair Lapid remains prime minister until November 25th, 2025.
Yep.
If you want to see what disaster is going to look like, just wait. That's what disaster is going to look like. It's not something.
Israel,
the future does not bode well.
But again, I don't see it lasting that long. I mean, again, I understand your logic that they don't want to fail because they want to stay in power. But if every government until now has collapsed, I think the Israeli people that they're not going to let it. They're not going to let it go that far.
Alan, every government that collapsed because of a vote of no confidence collapsed because someone thought that in the coming election they would do better. No one has ever pulled out of a government because they actually feared that they might do worse. I don't think there's anyone in the present government, with perhaps an exception of a Victor Lieberman, who will always get his 7 or 8 seats.
Right.
Shas will always get their 7, 8, or possibly 9 seats. But as far as the battle between Likud and the others that used to always sit in opposition, we know where the Israeli 70% of the Israeli voters are actually, if one was to talk about a political proclivity, they actually lean right when it comes to politics. The problem is how many hundreds of thousands of votes that voted for a right-wing candidate, Gideon Sa'ar, pause to laugh, who voted for a right-wing candidate, okay, Naftali Bennett, saw their votes stolen. Now, in America, when they talk about stolen votes, it's very different. These were votes that were cast for right-wing candidates. Naftali Bennett took to the air 2 days before the election on March 23rd. And what did he say? He said, I guarantee you, in his dispute with Bibi Netanyahu, my prime ministership, I will be, and he actually quantified it, I will be 10%, that's the number he gave, I'll be 10% more right-wing than you are to Bibi. 10% more. I don't know how one measures it, but nonetheless. And he also challenged Bibi Netanyahu on the air live. He held up a proclamation that already carried a signature. And the proclamation, it said 2 things: that he would never join a government with Yair Lapid, and that if he had the opportunity to form a coalition government, it would never, never, never allow that terrorist supporter, Mansour Abbas or Ram, to join. Well, we've been lied to. What a shocker. What a shocker. We've been lied to. And Alan, to come to your point, the people who voted for these guys will not vote for them again.
Correct.
That's the reason that they aren't going to pull out. And the people who voted for Mansour Abbas, oh my God, he's in government. He sits in the seat of the Knesset speaker with a gavel, and he's telling people like Mai Golan, he's telling her to shut up. She's done talking and to sit down. He is telling us what to do in our Knesset. Again, I repeat, my projection is that the only way that it collapses, not to suggest that it can't, but the only way that it would is if someone who's in the present government, I'm talking about, defects and realizes that once the term runs out, they will never be in politics again. And what they will do is they'll do what they did on June 13th. They will become, once again, political prostitutes. In this case, trying to win their seat back. They're going to try and win. Their assessment will be, if I'm the one that brings the government down, the right wing might vote for me again. There's nothing else that's going to save this. It's tragic. The Arabs are getting what the Arabs want. They've never had this before. You're talking about $53 billion. Excuse me, my mistake. 53 billion shekels. 16.8 billion. It's unfathomable. It's unfathomable what they're going to get. It's a remarkable number. They will never get it again. They'll never get it again. I mean, it's a total disaster. Over 10 years. Mahmoud Abbas is not the biggest enemy that Israel has. Mansour Abbas sits there with him. One is outside of Israel, one is inside of Israel.
Right, but that's why we are where we are, though, because the Arabs knew the last 30, 40 years of time was always going to be on their side. So we were never going to win based on narrative, based on history, based on facts. They knew, when I was going back to college, they knew that they're just going to wait this thing out until the Israelis, and they're on record saying, time is on our side. Abbas
there's no point.
He doesn't have to live to see a Palestinian state. It'll happen after he's gone. You've got a whole new generation of people who are much more violent than they are. They know nothing pre-1993. And so they were always playing for the long game. And again, the Jews are right. They are tired. The newer generation is more disconnected from Israel than ever before. So of course, time is not on our side. And you look at American politics, you look at European politics. It's happening all over Europe. They're selling out their own culture to these immigrants. So how is it not going to happen in America? How is it not going to happen in Israel? None of this is shocking to me.
There's one difference as far as if one looks at the geostrategic perspective. In 1974, when Gerald Ford replaced Nixon as president, and Kissinger complained about the fact that shuttle diplomacy wasn't working very well, and it wasn't working because it was the Israelis who were hesitant, the Israelis who were intransigent. So Gerald Ford called for what was then called a reassessment of American foreign policy in the Middle East. That was the title, a reassessment of American foreign policy in the Middle East. And the Phantom 4 jet fighters, which were the best in the world, which were promised to Israel had purchased them. This wasn't a gift, and most would not get delivered. Ford said that they would not be delivered until Israel would be a little more compliant with American pressures. If one looks at the numbers at the time, 1974, 1975, Israel had a GDP of $12.3 billion. The United States at the time was giving Israel $2.4 billion. One tells you that that's not an insignificant number. Today, prior to COVID, and it went down by 20 billion, but it'll be back up. Israel's GDP is $372 billion. And Israel is getting $3.8 billion from the United States, which isn't a grant. It's not a grant. And everyone in America tells me, oh my God, be careful. Israel can't survive without America. Israel used to get 2.4 billion out of its 12.3. It now gets 3.8 out of its 300. And Israel doesn't need America. America needs Israel. And the problem is that the Israeli salesmen aren't able to sell that line. Instead, what you have is the Arab world threaten to do harm to the Western world, and America rewards them. The East, Europe in the year 2051, okay, 30 years from today, Europe will be Muslim. They know
Correct.
that. If you look at the birth rate and everything else, what happens? Europe is actually financing the very people who are going to destroy its civilization. We are insane. We are truly insane.
So, Mayor, let me ask you. Mayor,
Yeah.
Mayor, let me ask you. So, okay, so if the GDP is such what you're saying, I'm not disputing it. I've seen that too. If that's what the GDP is, and it's not a grant what the states gives to what the U.S. gives Israel,
Right.
like you pointed out. And I may say also, I mean, I've studied this a lot, the demographics in Israel for Jews, that it's really on the high, and it's not what it was when Rabbi Kahana was alive. The demographics in Israel and the trend and the birth rates and everything, it has certainly shifted in favor of the Jewish people, and it is
Right.
continually climbing also. And Jewish identity, Torah observance and all that is on a rise. It's not what it was in the early 80s or the 70s or anything like that. With everything going on with the money and with the technology and the advancements and the identity and the positive birth rate demographics for the Jewish people, why is it that we're left in the mud and we don't, it's not being sold properly to our people, or we don't want to believe it, or we want to still think that we have the figures of 1974 that you gave us and such. Why is that?
Well, here, let me mention something. First of all, it's true that as far as the demographic figures, Yorm Ettinger was the first one who actually began to do wonderful studies, and he basically said that the threat we were once afraid that the Galilee today would be a significant majority and everything else. When one looks at the numbers, one says with the Arab birth rate, especially in places like in the congested areas, the Arab birth rate has actually dropped. It used to be 7.6, 7.7 per family. It's dropped to 5.1 or even less. Okay. The place where we have to be careful in not misinterpreting the numbers is when we look at the Jewish birth rate, which has grown. That Jewish birth rate has grown as an inflated. It is a statistical deception because it's mostly the Hasidim. It's the ultra-religious who are having their 8 and 9 children. So the reason that one can say that in another 20 years, the Jewish population is going to hold its own percentage-wise ratio, these aren't the people who go to the IDF. These are not the people who are the Zionists. They are either non-Zionists or anti-Zionists. And for that reason, there is much to be concerned about. The other thing
but I have read some articles that show that there's a change going on in the new generation of Haredi Jews as well. That it is a shift taking place. Now, I hope that's right. I hear what you're saying. Go ahead, Meir. Continue.
Yeah. There was a study. It was a definitive study. It's an interesting one. It was done about 6 years ago. 6 years ago, the liberal leftist camp in Israel. And you've got to remember, when people are surveyed in Israel, what percentage of you consider yourselves to be right wing? In Israel, the figure is 54%. What percentage of you call yourselves leftists? Now, I didn't say liberal, leftists.
Right.
It was 8%. The flavor of the country is it leans right. But to answer your question, or at least to make a comment about it, here's where the issue is. It's a very disturbing issue. Is that what Zionism used to mean to the average 17, 18, and 19-year-old, that is lost. It's gone. I had a gym in Israel for 10 years, Samson's gym in Jerusalem, and I would have so many. I think 35% of my membership were the 17 and 18-year-olds right before they went into the army. They wanted a quick, let me get, at the time, the influence of the movie, Schwarzenegger and Rocky, Sylvester Stallone. And when I would look at, when they filled out the application, I would look and I've noticed that quite a number of them, lived in Amona Netziv, the Hebrew, the Jewish community overlooking the promenade. When you look down and you see the whole, and I would say to them, I just as an exercise, and I'm talking about now 25 years ago, and I'd say, oh, you live on Rehov, oh, you live on Dov Gruner Street, oh, you live on. Ask them who Meir Weinstein is. Ask them who Dov Gruner is. These are the heroes. These are biblical-like heroes who lived only a couple of years before you and I were born. Remarkable. The 17-year-old in Israel didn't know who they were. He lived on the street named after them. Zionism, as we expect it to be, want it to be, is dead. It lives in one place only. And it's the place that's most vilified outside of Israel and also in Tel Aviv. And I hate to use the term, it lives in the settlements. It lives in the Jewish communities. It lives in Gush Etzion. That's where you have, these are the finest people in the world. That's where it lives. But in Israel, you will find you'll find a lot more people walking into a tattoo parlor in Israel today than you will walking into a synagogue.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah. It's the reality. It is reality. And it's tragic. It's truly tragic. And by the way, once again, I always end up pointing that accusatory finger at the government. And not only this government that turned left. Likud came to power on May 17, 1977. Menachem Begin, his 8th try, he becomes prime minister. His hero, the person who was probably most responsible for creating the IDF, even though he died in 1940, for the strongest Zionist we ever knew in our lifetime, or wasn't our lifetime, the lifetime that preceded ours, Zev Jabotinsky.
Mm-hmm.
What did Menachem Begin do? He was a disciple of Zev. He was literally a disciple of Zev Jabotinsky. What did he do? Well, we had a postage stamp of Zev Jabotinsky. We had Israeli paper currency that had Jabotinsky's face on it. We had 2 or 3 additional roads, which were named streets, named Rehov Jabotinsky. Was there a change in the ideological? Nah, there wasn't. What you had instead was Camp David. What you had instead was, here's a country that attacks Israel in Yom Kippur, realizes it can't defeat Israel militarily, and the Arabs learned something. Sadat was the godfather of this brilliant strategy. If you can't beat them with tanks, beat them by saying, I want peace. I want peace. And Israel will then give you the Sinai, which is 2.5 times the size of Israel itself. They will give you the Sinai, which included the Rafiq oil wells, which provided Israel with 100% of Israel's needs, with the stipulation, by the way, that Israel will provide the oil from Egypt once Egypt takes control of the oil wells, and Egypt charged Israel 165% what the rest of the world is paying. We never learn. It comes down to one thing. We are a people having been oppressed for 2,000 years. You mentioned Rabbi Kahana, and he told us, he was talking about, he likened this to New York Mets. He said when New York Mets finally in '69 won the World Series, he goes, they had lost and lost so badly for so many years, they didn't know how to win. Well, the same thing, right? So so the rabbi said, it's true. The Jews, after 2,000 years of exile, don't realize this isn't the nation of Woody Allen's. This is King David. This is King David. The 6-Day War was King David. And instead, what we do is we bend over backwards, as was evidenced by Benny Gantz inviting Mahmoud Abbas into his house. We bend over backwards. Please don't hate us. Please stop killing us. Please. This is the insanity. 4 days ago, Ismail Haniyeh from Hamas said that if Israel wasn't a little more compliant in the demands that Hamas now had in the negotiations that are happening right now in Syria, he said that Hamas is now going to kidnap some more Israeli soldiers in order to strengthen their bargaining chip in trying to get all the Arab terrorists out of prison. in Israel. This is what he said. Yisrael Haniya should have been killed the next day. The only policy that ever worked with Israel vis-a-vis Hamas was targeted assassination. Targeted assassination was the only thing that worked. And Israel doesn't believe in it anymore. It's tragically sad. I see, by the way, some photos that are posted on screen showing like the Haredi element of Tzahal, of the IDF. It's a magnificent thing to see, but the flip side of that coin is it's incredibly, incredibly, incredibly small.
Yep. Yep. What do you think it would take? What would it take to?
That ship sailed a long time ago, Mayor. That ship sailed a long time ago. You look at Israel, everything that Mayor Jolovitz said is true. You look at what's happening in America. We are going down, and I don't see that. So I'd look at New York City. Look at where we went as a city. Went from to a Giuliani to a Bloomberg, and then into the sewer. And this is the way the direction of our country is. When you had hot nose like AOC, who was a bartender, who the chairman of the Democrat Party said is the future of the Democrat Party. When you have Chuck Schumer, who's the most powerful senator in Washington, afraid of AOC, you know the direction of the country. As America goes, so goes the world. So you know what? Years ago, I remember every time I went to a meeting or I participated in a webinar, somebody would always ask, what can we do? It's, you know what? We can keep doing what we're doing to keep our heads above water a little bit. But as far as winning the battle, I don't think it's going to, I promise you, again, I'm not a pessimistic person, but it's lost. It's only a question of how long do we keep our heads above water, but we're not coming back.
Yeah. Alan is right.
I believe that, and it changed. Listen, I'm a deeply spiritual person. I believe in God. I go to shul every day, and that God has His plan, and I'm just a cog in that plan. But the world is not going to swing back the other way.
Yeah, Alan just said. Thank you for that comment, Alan. Alan just said that he's not a pessimistic person. You don't have to be pessimistic. If one looks at a graph, a chart, a line. On the one side, you have optimism. On the other side, you have pessimism. What we are talking about is realism.
Realism. Yep.
It's realism, and it's tragic. Okay, I mean, it really is tragic. And it has. Listen, I'm here in Arizona. My son, I have one son who lives here in Arizona, and a number of years ago, he was invited. He's in his 30s now. He was 25, 27 years. 27 years old. And a colleague of mine said, your son is quite articulate. He's a smart guy. Why don't you send him to the APAC? There's a meeting of APAC people. It's young professionals. What are young professionals? They were the 25 to 35-year-olds. And there was a gathering, which was apparently at least, I think the number he gave me was 80 strong. There were about 80 of them. And what they wanted is they wanted a contribution, and you would meet your peers, so to speak. So there were many places that I'd rather give the $200, but I gave the $200 on my son's behalf, and I said, go to the meeting. I'm just curious. So he goes to the meeting. He said of the 80 people, the 80 or so people who were there, they were all within that 25 to 35 range. He said that 40% of them were lawyers. Okay, not surprising, lawyers. And he said that a couple of people would comment, they would discuss, and he said he stood up and made a point, which was not a radical pro-JDL, pro-Khan, it was just a point about being proud and defending Israel. He said when he finished speaking, and he said he spoke for 2 or 3 minutes, he said at least 3 people came up to him after, when they had this, I don't know, wine testing or whatever, and they said to him the following, and these were not together. These are 3 individual comments. Why are you so pro-Israel? This was an APAC gathering. And you realize we're in trouble. You realize we're in trouble.
So I'll tell you a very
Anything else?
quick story.
Mayor,
Yeah.
Mayor, I've experienced all that. So
Yeah, yeah.
and I don't. But look, Jews living outside of Israel, it's called exile. Is America? What's going to be the future of America? Look, I don't know, but I know that every country that Jews have moved to, Germany, then and they lived great in Germany for a long time, but all of a sudden there's Auschwitz, and Europe, the soil is all soaked with Jewish blood. What will be the fate of the Jewish community in North America? Well, it's not looking pretty. I mean, we got, you can't even wear an Israeli shirt without being subject to attack, and they justify it. They're public about it, and no one's moving on them. And with the IRA definition and all that being even fought by some people, it's too strong, so on and so forth. And the bottom line is. And Meir, you know this too, that Rabbi Kahana said we're living in the era of the beginning of the redemption and the rise of the state of Israel. That's the beginning of the redemption. He also said there will not be a third exile. I believe it. And I believe the potential is there with Israel and with the Jewish people to turn it around. There's such potential. Who's going to lead it? I don't know. But there is so much potential there and so much that could be done. The possibilities exist in Israel that make Israel great as the right Jewish state that it should be, with the Beis Hamikdash, with everything. I mean, I believe it. I believe it. Exactly how? I can't say that, but quick story. I'm in Vancouver. I'm setting up a protest a number of years ago against a Sabeel conference. They embrace all the anti-Israel rhetoric. They invited the daughter of Khalida Jarrar, a leader of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, to give a speech at this conference. So I'm there. I brought people from the JDL there, and we met other people who support the JDL in Vancouver, and we were protesting for a number of days against this conference. We were also joined by some evangelical Christians who support Israel. They were great. They were great. And I remember on the Friday night, I went to the shul in Vancouver, and after davening, they had Shabbat meals, and they had a lot of Jewish students there for the Shabbat meal, and other Jews from the community. And it was set up by Chabad. And the rabbi there, he knew that we were in town to take a stand against anti-Semitism and the Sabeel conference. And I went up to the rabbi and I said, I came all the way from Toronto, and we're doing a lot of very important stuff here. And maybe I could say, just a few words here. And I've spoken in so many synagogues, and I don't have a problem with that. So the rabbi thinks about it, and then he comes over to me and he says, I thought about it. There's a lot of Jewish students here that are progressive. And I think I don't want to alienate them from the synagogue. So maybe another time, like I'm going to Vancouver every other.
Yeah.
So, and that was Chabad. So I never get discouraged. I never do. I have faith, and the rabbi had faith to his last breath on this earth. And that's how I see it. But I see tremendous potential there in Israel, in the Jewish people who cleave to Israel and want to help Israel and are part of Israel. That's where I'm at. I never give up, and we have to speak up.
I started writing an op-ed last week. I aborted. I'm not done. I'll get it done. Excuse me. The Jews are 0.2% of 1% of the world's population. The Jews, we're told, have scored 23% of the Nobel laureates, the Nobel Prizes. So when it comes to intelligence, brilliance, science, literature, and all that type of stuff, they actually scored 100-fold their numbers, 100-fold their numbers in winning these things. But when it comes to common sense, we are bereft. We are bereft. It's interesting when you talk about the lessons of history, and I'm not someone who's, this Jabotinsky was referred to as a prophet of doom, and Kahana also something similar, whatever. In 1922, Germany had a Jewish foreign minister appointed in 1922, a Jewish foreign minister. In 1933, they began building Dachau. In 1934, they completed building Dachau. If we don't understand how the tide can turn, and there's one answer, and the one answer, I think I've mentioned it before, we talk about all the virtues that we all wish that we possessed, the virtues that we want our children to possess, the virtues that make us better human beings. And they are generosity, loyalty, all these wonderful things. The most important virtue that one could possess, because without it the others are nothing, is courage. It's courage. Alan today with the others went out and did what they needed to do. The tragedy isn't that Alan, we've all heard the joke, right? That the rabbi or the preacher is in church or in the synagogue, and he's talking to the congregation of people there, and he's complaining about the fact that the majority of the people in the community don't come to church or don't come to synagogue. Well, damn it, you're lecturing the wrong people. They're there. They're there. The people on the outside who deserve your contempt.
Correct.
We don't seem to get it. We don't seem to get it.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
That's always been our problem. So, Meir, you're right. We always had potential. Potential was never our challenge. It's that we don't implement it. And for a variety of reasons.
You're right, Alan. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tragic. Charles de Gaulle, we've heard this. Charles de Gaulle was famous for having said, nations don't have friends, they only have interests. And it's true. Israel, which has contributed more to civilization than any kind. I mean, today, I had the radio show today, and I talked about how I'm different than the other speakers who boast about Israel's accomplishments in the science and this, in medicine, all these incredible accomplishments. Even the Arab terrorist who sets up his bomb using a phone, the intel and everything from Israel, whatever. And all these people think that the world is going to love us because we've invented all these wonderful medical appliances, there's this technology, high tech. That there was a particular decade in a 10-year period where Israel had 6 of the Nobel laureates in chemistry in a 10-year period. Brilliance. And yet, and this is the tragedy of it all, the world doesn't give a damn. We don't get points for inventing a little capsule that goes into the vein and takes photographs. We don't get credit for it. What have the Arabs invented? The Arabs invented the suicide bomb. Yeah. That's right. They invented the suicide bomb belt. And who does the European Union favor? The murderer. The murderer. Joe Biden will soon reopen the PLO office in Washington. Why would the Arab, the enemy, why would he act any different if he is, I was making reference earlier to Sadat, and it was a lesson that Arafat learned with Oslo in September 13th, 1993. They learned that you could win more with the pretense of peace than you can with tanks. And we are the ones who have bent over backwards and entertained them. It's tragic.
It is tragic. Listen, we're on for a while, but at the rally today, there was a speech given by Ina, the councilwoman. I wonder that video, if we could show that. It was just a dynamic, short speech, also right to the point. It was off the cuff how she spoke, but from the heart. If our doctor in the studio has that, I think that's something that we should show before we sign off. So, okay, our doctor in the studio, give me a minute. But Alan, you were there. That was quite dramatic.
Again, one, because I felt to, as I said earlier, if this was just about condemning anti-Semitism, I would have said, been there, done that. But here, the fact that 2 kids got beat up, and I remember Last year, Joey Borgen from Lawrence, New York, also got beat up on his way to a pro-Israel rally. So when I see Jews being targeted, and you had it in Los Angeles, and you have it in Miami, and when you have it in New York, that you're targeted either because you're wearing a yarmulke or you're wearing a pro-Israel T-shirt, and you can get away with it, and they're fearless about it. If we don't fight back, then you know what? Just wave the white flag and go home, because it's over. And it's so much more than anti-Semitism. It's about democracy. It's about the spirit and the soul of America. That we're absolutely turning it over to these criminals and the politicians who don't have the guts to fight. To even forget about loving Jews, not loving Jews. Whatever happened to law and order? Whatever happened to democracy? These are all principles and cornerstones of what a free country is supposed to be. And if we don't stand up for ourselves, nobody else is going to do it. And that's why I have to go to the rally. And again, believe me, I've got better things to do than to go on a rally on a Sunday. But if we don't do it, it means that we don't care. And if we don't care, it's over.
We have some of our cousins over there who are great fans of Iran,
Amalekites.
As you know, great friends. They are in love. They are in love with our enemies. They love Hezbollah. They love Hamas.
Jewish
Leaders of the anti.
Come out! We are not
You are spitting on. Spit on the graves of your grandparents. Okay, that was me screaming at them. No chelak in olam haba. Chilul Hashem. No chelak in olam haba. No yirei shamayim. No yirei shamayim. No chelak in olam haba. No chelak in olam haba.
So, Alan, since you were there, how far into it does she speak? It's a pretty long
she was
video.
one of the first speakers.
Okay.
Dov Hikind spoke. Ina spoke. The 2 boys who were set upon, they spoke, and then there was another gentleman named Ari Kagan, also from the former Soviet Union, who spoke. And then they had the rally. That's all. And then they had the march. I'm sorry, but in the meantime, you see these animals across the street, and that's David Beck, who always does the talking for Neturei Karta, and there's stupid signs with authentic Jews or authentic rabbis reject Zionism. How ugly! And what were they doing there? And as we said earlier, I reject them protesting at the Israeli Day Parade, but that's a different story. Here, 2 Jews got beat up, and you're defending it because they were wearing IDF T-shirts. This shows you the evil and the pure rishus of what Neturei Karta stands for. And again, right now you're looking at there were the Guardian Angels were there. She's coming into the screen. But Dov Hikind, this is in his wheelhouse. And there comes Ina. So I'll stop talking. Oh, you had her. There you go. Oh.
The councilwoman.
What? Oh. The one that was on our side?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, the kid next to Ina is Blake Zavatovsky. He's the one, in the pictures, the paper with the black eye. And this guy speaking now, this is Ari Kagan, who's also recently elected councilman.
Free zone. We have to be able to walk anywhere, at any time, wearing Star of David, being proud Jews, not being afraid to walk anywhere. Just a few months ago, right here in Bensonhurst, just a few blocks away from here, I hosted a rally against hatred attacks toward Asian Americans. Again, attack on one person, is attack against everyone. So we're all New Yorkers. We're all Americans. So it was not a disagreement about Middle East politics. It was not a roundtable discussion who is right and who was wrong. It was a pure hate. I contacted Eric Gonzalez, Brooklyn District Attorney. He is monitoring at any moment when this. And by the way, there were two attackers, not one. Am I right? There were two people who attacked. So both of them should be arrested. Both of them should be charged with hate crime, and both of them should never be released.
So Alan, keep talking. I'll try to find where she speaks. I think it was
Okay.
important.
Also,
Yeah.
again, you know, she's very active. We have, as far as politicians go, she's very dedicated to this cause. She escaped communism to America.
And we will
There you
not
go.
remove our kipputs, our IDF hoodies, and our stars of David. We will not surrender our identity just because somebody doesn't like it. We will never be victims again. 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 We will never be victims again.
Now, whether you agree with that slogan, I don't participate because I think it's a nice chant, but we're victims every day, and and we are self-created. We've allowed ourselves
that's
to
true.
become victims. So again,
Yeah.
it's a nice chant. I'm glad that she's there, but we've got.
Saudi was on a bus in Jerusalem when an 18-year-old Palestinian terrorist dressed as a religious Jew boarded and blew himself up. 17 people were killed, including all those seated and standing around her, and over 100 people were injured. Saudi
Okay, listen. Mayor, like I said before, you have hundreds of thousands of Israelis who have moved to the States. They all have some IDF background. Where are they to step up to the plate and help out?
Israelis.
The potential is there to take action.
Oh, they have here in New York. They have. There was a story of a guy. There was some guy. A cop told me this story that a guy pulled a gun on him and he just Krav Maga'd him until the police came. He just disarmed him, tied the guy up until the police came. So starting up with a guy who served in the IDF, they might learn their lesson, but there are very few, or at least in the New York area.
Well, they're not stepping up to the plate. The amount of them that are here, and that's what it is. So, I mean, I said there's the potential there, but there's,
Most Israelis, and don't forget the numbers are quite significant.
Yeah.
I'm going back 30 years ago. They were talking about up to 500,000 Yoredim Israelis living in Los Angeles alone. You've got large numbers in New York and everything else. Here in Phoenix, because of high-tech intel and such, you've got hundreds of them. They do not participate. Their attitude is, and their attitude will be, we did our service in Israel. We didn't come to America to become involved politically. Leave us alone. Yeah, it's a tragic.
Yeah. Well, listen, we've been on for a while already, so let's go with closing comments. Alan, go
Yeah, I
ahead.
just was curious. Let me just run by. The Common Reasons Hall Center did put out a list of the 10 what they graded to be the worst anti-Semitic. So I have that list. So perhaps
Okay.
I'll play through it and I'll pause it at each one. And I want you all give one comment on each
Sure.
of these following, and we'll start the countdown from 10 and go back down to 1. Okay? So let's see if I could. Now that I said I can do that, let's see if I can actually do that.
I made my list of 4.
So this is the Israel Now Never Again production, borrowed from the Seaman Rosenthal Center. We sadly present the Seaman Rosenthal Center Global Anti-Semitism 2021 Top 10 list. So let's start with the first and then do everybody's comments on it. Number 10 on the list is Unilever and Ben & Jerry's. So why don't you just go through the list, go from Jolowitz to Weinstein to Skorsky, and just give your comment. There's 10 of them, so let's get through this fairly quickly.
Well, it's impossible to do fairly quickly, so I'll reserve my comments until all 10 have appeared. Go ahead.
Okay, Meir?
Well, Ben and Jerry's, there you go. They made the list, and it's a couple of Jews that think there's nothing wrong with joining the BDS against Israel, and that's the tragedy of American Jews.
Okay, so here's what happened. They were stupid enough, as they always are, to give us an 18-month head start. So in the meantime, in Israel and even here domestically, they are planning on how to respond if Unilever does not put the squeeze on Ben & Jerry's when the contract expires. Two, you have at least to date, at least 11 states that have de-invested or uninvested from Unilever, costing billions and billions of dollars. So all those naysayers who said that Unilever and Ben & Jerry's aren't going to care if they lose a few pennies from the Orthodox community, they've been sorely mistaken. Unilever is getting clobbered in the stock market. Their shares have gone down in great value, so they are feeling the pinch on this.
Okay, for the next one, that's number 9. Is the University of Southern California president fails to condemn a student for putting blatant anti-Semitic tweets all over and posts all over, and she hasn't even lost a position or been questioned for this. Anybody care to comment, or is that one pretty obvious?
Well, again,
I think the significance is this: she's a Muslim student, and there needs to be more in-depth investigation. What Islamic center or organization is she affiliated with? Has any of the Islamic organizations that seem to be involved, quote unquote, with Jewish organizations in some kind of dialogue campaign, have these Islamic organizations, or any Islamic organizations for that matter, condemned her her vile anti-Semitic comments she made all over social media? That's something significant.
Well, and what I've said is, and this is the difference between right-wing versus left-wing anti-Semitism. On the right, they have no foundation or power base anywhere, whereas with the left, academia is one of their strongest places. This is not just student groups. This is faculty. This is heads of different departments, and this is why college campuses are so dangerous today for Jews and supporters of Israel.
And for those who kind of like to say that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, I mean, she clarifies that by making sure everybody realizes that she wants to kill every motherfucking Zionist and curse the Jews. So that says it all for her.
Yeah.
So for our next, on to number 8. No surprise, but what do you all think?
Oh, God.
We could just that's one I think we could just move on. That's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned just a few moments ago, Germany seemed like a good place in the 1920s, then seemed like it was having a turnaround in the 1980s, and now you can't even check into a hotel if you're wearing a Magen David. So comments?
Well, this is happening
The
throughout
only thing I
Europe.
can say about Germany is that I remember I don't know, in the 80s and in the 90s, probably the early 2000s, there were Jews from Israel leaving Israel and moving to Germany. I thought it was the most revolting thing I could ever hear about. And now that it's a lot more blatant in Germany, I guess those same Israelis are drinking some coffee right now and waking up a little bit.
Right. It's happening throughout Europe. It's happening in different political parties.
Sure.
And France is even worse. Great Britain, you saw what happened to Jeremy Corbyn's party. But this is happening throughout Europe. You have it in Sweden. You have it in Belgium. It's all over. In Germany is even worse.
Right.
And then we have number 6, just bring all together as social media giants and how much blatant anti-Semitism there is in cyberspace and social media. This is a new problem. All the other problems are just kind of echoes of times past, but this is technology has given rise to a whole new wave of anti-Semitism.
Right.
Yeah.
We interviewed Nitzana Darshan Leitner from Shurat Hadin, and they posted on Facebook 2 identical pages. One that was anti-Israel, one that was anti-Palestinian. The one that was anti-Palestinian was removed. The one that was anti-Israel was left up, and they were identical.
Look, on the issue of that's right, I remember that. On the issue of social media, like I said, we have tremendous potential how to fight back, and we don't have enough people stepping up to the plate. Yeah, you got this one organization or this one individual who's from our community that's monitoring different sites and posting some good stuff, and sometimes finding out, and it becomes a scandal, and taking down a site here and there. But I'm talking about what should really exist to tackle the problem on social media is a sort of like a Jewish Defense League on steroids, that we have guys to investigate properly, teams, and we could just knock the hell out of these groups. But I said the potential is there. That's about it.
And of course, this is a new entry on the list, is Jewish Voice for Peace, a progressive, allegedly Jew-ish group, actually made the list in the Summit Wiesenthal Center. So any commentary on that?
They shouldn't be the only one. If Not Now is just as bad as they are. Code Pink is just as bad as they are. They are one step below J Street. But all these anti-Israel groups, if you go on Twitter, I follow these left-wing Jewish groups, and listen, people from Haaretz, the editors at Haaretz are even worse than they are. So that this is one group is great, but you add Truett to the list, add Rabbis for Human Rights, they're all part of the same group. They're all breaking the silence is the same. That this group made it and the other ones didn't, unless this one is the umbrella for everybody else. I don't know why the other ones were left off.
Good
I
point.
think they came out in particular for a Hanukkah festivity against apartheid Israel. I think that's what kind of tipped them over the edge this year.
Oh, that was it.
And of course, we have COVID and all the accusations that COVID is a Zionist plot. It's kind of
Sure.
like the Protocols of Zion being rewritten.
Right. If you remember very early on when it was reported that Israel had a cure for COVID, the Palestinians said, well, of course they have the cure for it. They're the ones who caused it.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Just because we go to Chinese restaurants on Sunday nights doesn't mean we're conspiring to cause a virus. So, that's probably their association.
Right.
So let's see, moving along.
Oh, the BBC.
Yeah. Oops, let's look that one up. But let's go on. If you look over on the left-hand side of your screen, you have the BBC United Kingdom, and they go and quote from things they've actually said, which are so blatantly anti-Semitic. And the fact that they said that the people speaking Yiddish on the bus were yelling out racial anti-ethnic slurs, and all they were doing was yelling for help. So that's not a big surprise.
Well, that's the media for you. So you got the BBC, and we also have the CBC, and there's so many. And we had an episode, one of our shows, we were talking about. I think it was on Saturday Night Live. They had a skit that was anti-Semitic, and there were some TV shows, doctor shows, viciously anti-Semitic. We exposed all that, and we got apologies, but the damage was done already. Yeah, the BBC. They say that the Jews who were celebrating Hanukkah in London, that on the bus, they must have said something to provoke the Muslims out there for screaming their viciously anti-Semitic remarks. It's lighting a menorah publicly or singing some Jewish songs for Hanukkah. It must be offensive because, after all, you're commemorating the liberation of Israel. That's what Hanukkah is about. So therefore, you wear an IDF shirt, you identify something about Israel, you might as well throw away the entire Judaism, our religion, according to them.
And then we get to number one on the list, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Should be proud of themselves. But of course, we have Iran. And, you know, the irony that the progressive American Jews think we should sign a peace treaty with them, sing kumbaya, and smoke a peace pipe.
Well, listen, it could, because the Jewish left thinks that these are just, you know, what's the words that that Geraldo used, just flourishing. I forgot what the terminology is, but just these are just empty words. They're just saber rattling, but they don't really mean it.
Yeah.
And we Jews have known already, when they tell you it, believe them when they tell you.
You know, I don't know. Like, Israel's on the cutting edge of military technology, and they say they don't even use 1% of what they have in their arsenal. So, you know, after Auschwitz, I can't understand why Israel doesn't use their means to totally, to put it politely, disarm Hamas, the Islamic Jihad, the PFLP, those who murder us.
Right.
I can't understand why they don't do that. And if it means that they're going to live a chaotic life without that kind of rule, well, I guess so be it. So what? So, you know, who cares? These are people that want Israel destroyed. We have to care.
Yeah, here's the spokesman for the Iranian Armed Forces saying, and I quote, recently, Israel must be eliminated. We have not fallen back, nor will we fall back a single step from this strategy. The strategy of the resistance front is the annihilation of the Zionist entity and the elimination of this founding regime. I mean, what does the present U.S. government think he means when he says that? I'm just kind of confused as to where the ambiguity lies.
You know, Rabbi Meir Kahane said if there would ever be someone that would rise and to make it brief, to articulate the same kind of doctrine or belief as Hitler, to not take him out would be just catastrophic. Why these people exist, that their whole goal in life is to decimate and destroy the Jewish people, I have no idea why they're still breathing.
Yeah. So getting
But I
back
gotta
to
hear
Meir
from-
Jalowitz, who saved all
But I
the
gotta hear from Meir.
He's wound up. Meir Jalowitz is wound up.
I am
Okay.
speechless. I'm speechless. Actually, no, I smile. It's because I think I'm on camera and I don't want history to record me crying right now. What you guys said is, I mean, it's absolutely right. Just one comment about what Alan said, one comment about what you said, Meir. I mean, everything you said was right. Alan was absolutely right when he said, why the Jewish Voice for Peace? Why not all the others? And he named all the appropriate ones. The two organizations which were absent, which are anti-Semitic, one is the Anti-Defamation League with its esteemed,
Green Black.
intrepid leader, right? And the other is J Street, of course.
Yes.
Anyhow, it's an embarrassment. The comment that Meir made, and he's right, he was talking about that Israel, if Israel would use its arsenal, what Israel is doing, I don't have to tell you, they're doing the roof knocking. They knock on the roof before they drop a bomb. Israel, last year, listen to this, in a 30-day period, Israel struck against Hamas 81 times. Casualties, are you ready for this? You don't need your calculator. Two. There were 2 reported Hamas people killed. 81 strikes. Israel gives them time, close shop, take out your computers, take out your color television sets. But that isn't the worst part of it. The worst part of it is, while during those 11 days, when 4,369 rockets fell on Israel, not all of them fell on Israel, some fell short, and they fell on airbeds. But when 4,369 rockets were launched at Israel, and there's a discrepancy as to the accuracy because Israel doesn't want to reveal. Ishmael Haniyeh's, either his daughter or his niece, was being operated on with the best medical attention in the world in Soroka Hospital in Israel. This is the obscenity. This is the obscenity. While they're launching rockets in order to kill Jews, Israeli doctors are administering to their nieces and daughters, what have you. Nothing. There is no right now, what you should have, I have it on my radio show, even though I don't employ it a lot. Gary's quite a good man with the tech. You need to have the theme from the Twilight Zone. And when you sign off, instead of having that theme from the movie Exodus or whatever you do, you should play the theme from the Twilight Zone. Anyhow, I applaud you both. Alan, it's a pleasure always to share a microphone with you. You're a good man.
You as well. Thank you.
And Meir, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
But as soon as the camera, I'm laughing. As soon as the camera shuts down,
I know.
you will hear me weep. You will hear me weep.
And I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyhow, gentlemen, thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Pleasure.
Any closing comments from those still there? Alan, Mayor?
Well,
We're good.
Okay.
I think Meir
the
summarized
first
it.
show of the new year, a closing song should be Hatikva, so I shall play it, and we'll see you all guys real soon. Thanks for everybody who's participated.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you.
Bye.
קולות בלבב בנימה
נפש יהודי
הומייה
ותן מזרח קדימה
עין לציון צופיה עוד לא אבדה תקוותנו התקווה בשנות 2000 להיות החופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון מירושלים להיות החופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון מירושלים.
Shalom Aleinu